Howdy folks, welcome back to another Mingles with Jingles. Gonna crack straight on with the questions, but first one question that keeps popping up every time I put one of these videos up is, what's that cool music from the intro from? The music is from the movie 1941, which was the first movie Steven Spielberg made after Jaws, and it was a bit of a flop, but it was hilarious. Starring, well, a whole bunch of people, but primarily starring John Belushi as Major Wild Bill Kelso, a P-40 Kitty Hawk pilot. And the music that you hear in the intro was basically the march from 1941, conducted by John Williams, performed by the Boston Pops Philharmonic Orchestra, and it was Wild Bill Kelso's theme tune from the movie. So that's what the music is. People keep asking. It's not the first video I've put it in, but everybody always wants to know, wow, it's a really catchy tune, what's it from? So there you go. John Williams music from Steven Spielberg, Second World War movie, 1941. Cracking straight on with the first question. Back NFL wants to know, will I be at Tankfest 2013? You bet your ass I will. I've already got my ticket booked. I'll be there on Sunday the 30th of June. You'll probably be able to catch me lurking around the wargaming stand, but I'll be all over the place. And I have just paid out £300 for video equipment in order to record everything I see there. And as well as Tankfest at the Bovington Tank Museum, I figured it'd be a waste of money just, spending all that cash on a video camera that I'm only going to use once. So I've got a bunch of other museum trips coming up. I'm going to the Imperial War Museum in London. I'm off to the R.J. Mitchell Memorial Museum at Solent Sky in Southampton. The Royal Armouries at Fort Nelson in Portsmouth. And I'm going to be taking the video camera along and putting the results up on YouTube for you guys to see all this cool shit that I'm going along to visit. So yes, I will be going to Tankfest 2013 and a whole bunch of other military museums over the course of the next few months, and I'll be bringing you the results and putting them up on YouTube. So there's that to look forward to. The next question comes from... Okay, look, this is his name, right? This is not my fault. The next question comes from Masterfuck3000. God, I love that name. Anyway, his question is to address my well-publicised hatred of the Yak-9T. And he asks, well, he makes a couple of points and asks for my response to those points. And his points are this, and they are good points. You've got to give him this much. And here they are. First, 37mm cannon should tear aircraft to pieces. Second, it only has 30 rounds of ammunition for it. Third, since it only packs one additional 50 caliber machine gun, the weight of one 37mm cannon and one 50 cal isn't that much, so the speed and acceleration of the Yak is probably fair because the weapons don't weigh that much. And four, it's got good armour, but come on Jingles, it's not alien technology. So he does raise four good points, and absolutely worthy of comment. But what I want to do is, well, I'll address them each in turn, and then I'll talk about the Yak as a package, about everything combined. And first of all, I agree, he's absolutely correct. A 37mm cannon hits your aircraft with a high explosive incendiary shell. If you're flying a fighter, it should rip it in half. That's what 37mm cannons were for, killing air targets very, very quickly. And he's also absolutely right, it does only have 30 rounds of ammunition. And that is one of the reasons that I do tend to laugh a bit when I see people flying Yak-9Ts in historical battles, unless they're very, very, very good Yak-9T pilots. And when I say that, I mean very good shots. They just can't get any kills because they put so many ranging shots into the target, trying to figure out where their shots are going and follow the tracer. By the time they're ready for the kill shot, they've run out of ammo, and all they've got left is one 50 caliber machine gun. And if you watch my P-51 Mustang video, you'll see just how effective 50 caliber machine guns are, even when you have 6 of them. So I'm not worried about Yak-9Ts in historical battles. But most people aren't complaining about Yak-9Ts in historical battles, they're complaining about them in arcade battles where they can reload that 37mm cannon. But oh look, there's another aircraft with a 37mm cannon, the Airacobra and the King Cobra. And people do complain about the Airacobra and the King Cobra, but they're drowned out by the multitude of people complaining about the Yak-9T. And it's not just the 37mm gun, it's the whole package. Now, Masterfuck3000 says that he thinks the flight model of the thing is fair because it doesn't carry a lot of weapons. And yes, it's got good armour, but the armour isn't, it's not like it carries a force field or anything. So addressing the whole package, this I think is the problem. You see, nobody really complains about the Aerocobra or the King Cobra, because when you shoot at an Aerocobra and a King Cobra, it flies as if it's damaged. That doesn't happen with the Yak 9T. You can fill the hole, you can fill the wings full of holes, you can pepper the fuselage with machine gun and cannon fire, you can rip off the elevators, and it doesn't fly that much different to a completely undamaged aircraft. You don't get that with aircraft of other nations. And it's the fact that it's a deadly killer of an aircraft with that 37mm cannon, and it remains being a deadly killer of an aircraft until you have actually killed it. That's probably the major reason why people hate the bloody thing so much, because once you get on the tail of an Aerocobra and you start putting holes in him, he becomes easier and easier to kill. That doesn't really happen with the Yak 9T. Now, this happens for a number of reasons. As some of you may be aware, I have mentioned it in previous videos, the information is up there. Gaijin have two separate development teams working on their flight models. They have one team for the Russian aircraft and one team for everybody else. And these two development teams in the past, haven't been talking to each other much. Well, it turns out that there's actually a very good reason for why these two development teams haven't been speaking to each other. They're not allowed to. The guys working on the Russian flight models are working on the Russian flight models because they have been cleared to see the classified documents that they're using to develop the Russian aircraft. The guys working on all of the other nations are working on all of the other nations because they are not cleared to see the classified documents that Gaijin are using to develop the flight models for the Russian aircraft. And they're not allowed to talk to each other for security reasons. Strange but true. They're taking steps to try to get around this and having somebody who's cleared for both to sort of, coordinate both groups. So, things are going to get better. And in the meantime, they have been taking steps to attempt to balance the Yak 9T without making it historically inaccurate, if you like. There's nothing they can do about the 37mm cannon. It had a 37mm cannon. That 37mm cannon did one-shot kill aircraft. It's going to continue to one-shot kill aircraft. They've taken steps to, if you hold the trigger down after you've fired 5 shots, the gun will overheat and jam. So there's that. Of course, a good Yak 9T pilot only needs one shot to kill you. but a good Yak 9T pilot should be killing other players who aren't as good as him because he's a good pilot. They've recently addressed the flight model of the Yak 9T, and they have made it into much less of a dangerous dogfighter. Now it's more of a boom and zoom aircraft. But again, the Yak 9T is a rank 9 aircraft. You look at the P-51 Mustang, which is also a very, very good boom and zoom aircraft. But the problem with the P-51 Mustang is it only has those 50 caliber machine guns, and you can line up a perfect dive on a target, get a good 3-second burst into him with those 50 cals, shred his control surfaces, zoom away. It's not enough to kill him. You get a 3-second burst into somebody with a Yak 9T as you dive on them, they're going to take so much damage. The next aircraft they load is going to be is going to be taking hits from it. It's going to be a difficult balancing act. I don't believe the Yak 9T should be a rank 9 aircraft. I think it's just too powerful. But that is going to change. All they need to do, well, I say all, it's going to be a big job, but all they need to do is make it respond to taking damage the same way everybody else's aircraft in the game does. And that's definitely on the cards, and it's a work in progress. So, I'm confident that they'll be able to do something about it. There's no way they can carry on having two development teams working on separate nations' aircraft without any kind of oversight, and that's certainly something that they're addressing, and that basically is the root of the problem. It's not so much the fact that the Yak 9T is a dangerous aircraft. It's supposed to be a dangerous aircraft. It's the fact that other dangerous aircraft armed with the same kind of weapons just don't have their performance degrade when they get shot at. Or rather, they do have their performance degrade when they get shot at, the way that a lot of the Russian fighter aircraft currently don't. And that is being addressed, and we'll have to come back and revisit this argument when that makes it into the game. The next question comes from STX Crew. It's a World of Tanks question. He wants to know, would I buy the BTSV if it was on sale for the same as a Tier 8 premium like the T-34? So, World of Tanks question. Simple answer, yes. Absolutely, 100%. I definitely would. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about here, the BTSV is a premium Tier 3 Russian light tank in World of Tanks. And I managed to get my hands and have a go on one, and absolutely loved it. I think it's an amazingly fun little tank. But you can't get it on the North American server, or the Southeast Asian server, or the European server. You can only get it on the Russian server, and the only way to get it on the Russian server is to buy a special edition pack of World of Tanks, which contains a code for the BTSV, which you redeem in your account profile on the World of Tanks website. Well, it turns out that there is actually a way that the rest of us can get one of these little tanks. The codes work regardless of which server you're on. But you have to buy a Russian version of World of Tanks and basically throw the box away and just keep the code. And it's very, very expensive. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I have tried. I've tried to pay more than it would cost to buy a premium Tier 8. I've tried to pay as much as it would cost to buy 2 premium Tier 8 tanks to get my hands on this BTSV. And it required copious use of Google Translate on the Russian World of Tanks website to order a Russian boxed copy, special edition version of World of Tanks and have it shipped via Russian post all the way to my home address. And you absolutely can 100% do it. Unfortunately, as soon as it came to the part where I was trying to pay for the thing, and it was literally a case of just shut up and take my money, I want this tank, the website where you pay for it just failed. I just could not make the thing take my money. So you guys can get your hands on one of these things. It's going to cost you a lot. We're talking like €100, possibly more. The postage costs, I think the postage actually costs more than buying the game. And good luck to you, because if you manage to get your hands on one of these things, let me know, because I'm going to be so jealous. But yeah, definitely, if they put this BTSV Tier 3 premium Russian tank on sale in the gift shop and said €50 please, I would buy it. No question about it. I really enjoyed playing that little tank that much. BR Brasso wants to know, if you could relive one moment from your life, what would it be? That's actually quite an easy question. I've got this one. The day I joined the Royal Navy, or the day I went into the careers office to attempt to join the Royal Navy, I walked into Gunner House in Newcastle upon Tyne and sat down in front of a warrant officer, Royal Marines, and he said, "Right then, my son, I know what you want to be. You want to be a radio operator." I said, "Well, actually, I want to be a communications technician." He says, "No, you don't. You don't want to be a communications technician." And he pulled out all these charts of pay scales, and he showed me that communications technicians basically got paid shit in their first year of service. And then they got paid slightly more in their second year of service. And then in their third year of service, they got paid pretty much the same as a radio operator got paid the day he joined up. And I was young and stupid, and I fell for it. The thing you have to understand about about military recruiters is that most of the time they will not tell you outright lies, but they've got ways and means of presenting, of selecting the facts that they want to show you in order to steer you into joining up in the branches that they want you to join up. Because recruiters have quotas. The director of naval recruiting says we need more radio operators, so the recruiters have to go out and recruit radio operators. And this guy told me, "Oh yeah, sure, you could join as a radio operator right away, but if you wanted to be a communications technician, you'd have to wait, or it could be 6 months, could be a year, before we could invite you in," and so on and so on. And I fell for it because I was young and stupid. What he didn't tell me, of course, was that communications technicians might have to get paid crap for the first 3 years because they're in training for 3 years. But once they come out of training, it's practically guaranteed promotion all the way up to Chief Petty Officer. And you'd be a Chief Petty Officer within 6 to 8 years, at the most, of joining the Navy. if you joined up as a communications technician, whereas if you joined up as a radio operator, you could do 22 years and still be an able rating by the end of it. You know, the facts like these, they weren't in a rush to point out to me. And so I was a mug and I signed on the dotted line and joined up as a radio operator. And not once did it occur to me to ask the question, hold on, why do you need radio operators so badly? What's so bad about being a radio operator in the Navy that everybody is leaving because they don't want to do it anymore, and you're so desperate to recruit more? See, questions like that never occurred to me. And so I ended up joining up as a radio operator, and I hated it, and I wasn't very good at it, and it took me 6 years to get out of the branch and become an admin clerk, what they call a writer in the Navy. I never did become a communications technician, and I do regret that, but I don't regret becoming a writer because it was an easy life, it was a great job, and I basically loved it for 16 years. So if I had to relive one moment in my life, it would be walking into the Gunner House, Royal Navy and Royal Marines recruiting office in Newcastle upon Tyne, sticking to my guns and not taking no shit from no recruiters. So those of you who are thinking of joining the military, bear this one in mind. All right, the recruiters are not there to see that you get placed in the best job for you when you join the military. They're there to fill a quota and to recruit the numbers that they need for the branches of service that the Director of Recruiting needs. They're not there to do you any favours. So if you're thinking of joining the military, bear that in mind. Do your research before you walk in the door. This question comes from just about all of you who watch the War Thunder videos. And the question is this: show us some jet games, damn you, Jingles. And yeah, well, I am actually trying to show you some jet games, despite the fact that I bloody hate flying jets. They're the ultimate boom and zoom aircraft, and I'm not much of a boom and zoom pilot, but that's not the major sticking point. The major sticking point is this. This is what happens when you click the join battle button when you've got jets in your lineup. You sit there staring at this screen for 10 minutes, and then that happens. Nobody's flying jets. Hardly anybody has them. And I suspect, I don't know, it may be the case that the people that have jets, I mean, I ground all the way up to rank 17 in the British aircraft line, got my Gloucester Meteors and absolutely hated playing them. And it may very well be the case that I'm not alone in that feeling. And I do know other jet pilots, and almost all of them feel the same way. Jets suck. They're just not fun to fly. Not everybody feels the same way. I know one person who flies jets. I don't know that many people who fly jets, but I know one person who flies jets and he loves it. But the other 3 or 4 are of the same opinion as me. Flying jets is bloody boring because they are so ridiculously expensive to repair. You don't dare get them shot at, which means that you end up spending 90% of your time in a jet at high altitude running away from anybody who poses a threat to you, and not actually fighting, shooting at and killing enemy aircraft. And that's really boring. But I will keep plugging away at it. I'll just say don't expect much jet gameplay anytime soon, because it's hard damn work trying to get into a game where you can actually fly the jets, and then when you do get into a game with jets it sucks and it's just not worth putting on YouTube. So I'll keep plugging away, but don't expect miracles. Next question is a World of Tanks question from Blaine93, and he wants to know, do I think historical battles will make medium tanks more fun to play? I actually like this question a lot. First of all, I think medium tanks are the most fun tanks in the game to play anyway. But I appreciate why he's asking the question, because medium tanks are fantastic if you're in a good platoon and you use Wolfpack tactics. If you're not in a platoon and you're playing alone in random battles in World of Tanks, well, all too often the mediums just get hung out to dry by the heavies who don't support them and take advantage of the mediums flanking the targets, and they just sit there and watch you die, and then they take turns poking their nose around the corner, getting shot at by whoever just killed you. And it's frustrating. And so I appreciate where the question's coming from. However, there are problems with historical battles in World of Tanks. And I know that there are not historical battles in World of Tanks at the moment. Certainly not officially supported. And they have been talking about putting in historical battles for a long, long, long time. And for a good long time, I was a member of the unofficial historical battles group in World of Tanks, and we would play a historical battle every Sunday, and they quite literally were recreating famous tank battles and famous tank engagements and what have you from the Second World War using the vehicles available in World of Tanks. But there were problems with it, and the problems with it were this: Panthers and Tigers kicked everybody's arse. And you might say, well, where's the problem with that? Panthers and Tigers did kick everybody's arse. And you're absolutely true, and that's the whole point of these battles being historical. But it ain't no fun if you're in a T-34-85. Because in order to have parity and make the battle balanced, you'd have to outnumber the Tigers and Panthers by 3-1. Because in numerous of the historical battles that we fought, the two T-34-85s, 2-on-1, could not kill a Panther. Right? The Panther would kill them both. He'd be badly damaged, but he would kill them both. Because the Panther has a better gun, it's got better armour, and it's got almost twice as much health, because it's a Tier 7 medium tank, and the T-34-85 is only a Tier 6 medium tank. And therein lies the problem with historical battles in World of Tanks as it currently stands. It's because of the tiering system. You would have to balance by putting that many more, for example, T-34-85s in a historical battle against the number of Panthers and Tigers that were there. And that would balance things and make it historically accurate, but it ain't no fun for the poor schmucks in the T-34-85s, or even worse, the M4 Shermans. I mean, that's only Tier 5. So it would just be a turkey shoot. What you would see is everybody queuing up in their Panthers and Tigers for historical battles, and nobody queuing up in M4 Shermans and T-34-85s and so on and so on and so on. And so the games would never get off the ground. It'd be like queuing up for a War Thunder game in a jet. There's just nobody else there for you to fight against. I'd love to see officially supported historical battles in World of Tanks, but I don't think it's going to happen. They've been talking about doing it for years, and it's just never occurred. And I think it's because of this is the reason why. If you are interested in historical battles, I'd recommend, certainly if you play on the EU server. I know that there is a historical battle community. It's been going strong. I don't play the games anymore, but it's still going strong. And I'll put the link up for the forum thread on the EU forums if you're interested. It's definitely fun. Everybody plays with 50% crews. There's a mod that they use which turns off most of the UI elements, so you have to actually be able to see. You know, there's no red tank markers showing you where the targets are. You have to communicate. You have to actively coordinate your team. It's so much more tactical. And if you're interested in that sort of thing, I definitely encourage you to go along and take a look and see what the historical battle community is doing. But I don't believe historical battles are ever going to be anything that Wargame are going to put in. I think it's purely going to be a community-sponsored activity. So there's your answer. Well, it's rapidly approaching that point in the video where I regale you with stories from my misspent youth in the military. But before we get there, there's some news coming up about the tank section of War Thunder. That will probably be of interest to, well, most of you, even the guys that are only here for the World of Tanks stuff. I was playing with RamJB a few days ago, and he attended the latest developer Q&A on TeamSpeak. And he informs me, for those of you who haven't already heard about it, which is probably most of you, that what they're planning to do for the tank section of War Thunder, for the ground battle section, is multi-crew vehicles. What that means is you can team up with a friend in the same tank, one of you driving it and one of you operating the gun. That is going to happen. What they then went on to say is that if it works and they can adapt the technology for the plane section of War Thunder, they would like to use the same idea in aircraft. In other words, you could be flying your B-17 and have your friends manning the gun turrets and being the bombardier, you know, things like that. Now, they are not saying that this is going to happen. Okay, they've got to cover their arses here because it might not be possible to translate the technology into the air section of War Thunder. But it is definitely going to be a feature that they want to implement for the tanks, and if they can make it work with the aircraft, they would like to try to do it. So there's a bit of news there for you guys who are interested in War Thunder, and possibly even for you guys who are interested in World of Tanks, since it relates to the ground combat section of War Thunder as well. So there's that. And finally, we end up at probably the most popular section of these videos, the what I did in the Navy part. And I want to tell you a story of probably the biggest cock-up I ever did while I was in the military. It's from back when I was a radio operator in my first 6 years of service in the Navy. And radio operators are responsible for the ceremonies of colours and sunset. And what colours and sunset are is basically when you raise the white ensign in the morning, you wake the Queen up in the morning, that's colours, and you put the Queen to bed in the evening and you take the flag down, that's sunset. And it's just a very, very small part of what radio operators do, and they've traditionally got that job because communications in the Navy for a long time was done by flag hoists, so it made sense that radio operators inherited the job of doing colours and sunset. And for something that sounds so trivial, more radio operators went in the shit over colours and sunset. Just to give you an example, I know people who have accidentally left the main communications office unlocked. You know, it's full of cryptographic material, and have been punished nowhere near as severely as the same person who has been 30 seconds late for colours in the morning. And it sounds absurd, but the military takes ceremonial stuff very, very seriously. Certainly more in the Army than they do in the Navy. But colours and sunset is a very, very visible ceremony. If you screw something up on board, the potential for embarrassment to the captain is much less severe because it's happened on board between decks and only the people on board know about it. But if you screw up colours and sunset, everybody around the ship can see it. You know, it's a very, very public thing. So you tend to go in the crap for screwing up colours and sunset much, much more than anything else that a radio operator ever does. So there's that. Well, anyway, many, many years ago, when I was on my first ship, HMS Brazen, Plymouth-based Type 22 frigate, we were at the ammunitioning buoys in Plymouth Sound. So we're actually at anchor, and what the procedure was the guys who were on the off-going watch in the MCO, so you've been on watch since 2 in the morning, and you're due to go off watch at 8, but colours is at 8, so the off-going watch would be responsible for putting the flags on the relevant flagstaffs. So there was a flagstaff at the back end of the ship on the flight deck. That was where the ensign was raised, so it was called the ensign staff. And the ensign was kept inside a bag, big white canvas bag, called the ensign bag. Makes sense. And we knew it was the ensign bag because it had the word ensign written on it. And at the front of the ship, on the forecastle, the pointy end, there was another flagstaff. This was where the Union Jack was hoisted, so it was called the Jack Staff. And the Jack Staff was in its own white canvas bag, which was tied onto the staff, and then you'd attach via Inglefield clips the halyards that actually pulled the flags up to the flag itself, still inside the bag. So the idea was the off-going watch would put the flags on the relevant staffs, and then they would go back to the MCO and they would wait until the oncoming watch, the guys that were coming on watch at 8 in the morning, they would actually conduct the ceremonies of colours. And then when that was complete, they would come up to the MCO and you do a handover, and then you would go and have breakfast and go to bed, and they would be on watch for the next 4 hours. So the off-going watch put the flags on the staffs, the oncoming watch had the responsibility of conducting the actual ceremony. Well, on this particular morning, I got given the job of putting the... You know what's coming. I got given the job of putting the Jack bag on the Jack staff at the forecastle and putting the ensign bag on the ensign staff at the forecastle. I just want to point out, I was not the person who put the Jack in the Jack bag or the ensign in the ensign bag, but I didn't check. that the right flag was in the right bag. Yeah, you know exactly what's coming here. So anyway, I went and I did it, and then I came back to the MCO. And you have to realise that because we were at the ammunitioning boys and we were taking on ammunition, and this was happening early in the morning, this had already started before colours and sunset. Before colours at 8 o'clock in the morning. So the upper deck was a hive of activity. Right, there were seamen all over the place, working ropes and cables. There were senior rates all over the place. There were officers, the partnership officers were all there. Practically everybody was already up and out of bed and had been working on the upper deck for at least half an hour before colours happened. So almost the entire ship's company was on the upper deck. The captain was on the bridge, the XO was on the bridge, everybody was up. And then at the stroke of 8 o'clock, a main broadcast pipe was made, attention on the upper deck, face aft and salute, colours. And the entire ship's company had to bring themselves to attention, anybody on the upper deck, bring themselves to attention, face aft, salute, and wait, keep saluting, until they heard, carry on. Well, the carry on never happened. And instead, what did happen was I got personally invited over the main broadcast to get my arse down to the flight deck very, very quick. So I ran down to the flight deck and I just knew what had happened. I knew before I got there what had happened. I was shitting myself. And I got down to the flight deck and all you could see was the boatswain's mate, the quartermaster, the officer of the watch, the master at arms, the marine engineering officer, the supply officer, the whole quarterdeck partnership, just laughing their asses off, or trying not to. And there on the ensign staff, where you should have seen a white ensign, flapping in the wind, halfway up the ensign staff was a Union Jack. And the poor bastard responsible for pulling the thing up was just frozen in place, like still holding onto the halyards halfway up, just staring at this Union Jack with the master at arms yelling at it right in his ear, "Get that flag up, get that bloody flag up, get it up now." And he's just staring at this Union Jack going, just shaking his head. Well, oh no. So I ran over and I whipped this Union Jack down. I ripped the Inglefield clips off, tucked it under my arm, and I ran up the port waist, just elbowing everybody aside to get the Union Jack to the jack staff on the forecastle. Got to the forecastle, had to run under the bridge wings to get to the forecastle. And the communications yeoman, the captain's on the bridge, the XO's on the bridge, the communications yeoman is standing on the bridge wings with the XO, screaming at the top of his lungs to the poor bastard responsible for pulling the jack up to get the jack up. And this guy's just... all the forecastle partnership are standing around laughing their asses off, and this poor guy's just standing there and he's just staring inside the jack bag, and he's looking at a white ensign in the jack bag, and he's just shaking his head and like, oh please let me not be here. So then I run up with the jack and I rip the clips off the ensign and I start putting the jack onto the halyard so that he can pull the jack up, and then I can grab the ensign and run that down to the flight deck, and at that precise moment, couldn't have gotten worse if you'd planned it. There was another main broadcast pipe. Attention on the upper deck, face to port and salute, Flag Officer Plymouth. So, the Admiral in command of Plymouth chose that precise moment to go for a little ride in his Admiral's launch and go and see what was going on with HMS Brazen. So in front of the entire ship's company and Flag Officer Plymouth himself, I managed to, in the most public way possible, totally embarrass our captain. And oh boy, I went in the shit for that one. Oh yeah, and it wasn't, I did everything right. I put the jack on the jack staff. I put the jack bag on the jack staff. I put the ensign bag on the ensign staff. Didn't check that the bags had the right flags in them though. So for the next 3 months, I was invited, as a result of my actions on that day, to tie the bags on to the relevant staffs and make sure the right flags were in the bags at every, by 7:30 in the morning, every morning for the next 3 months. So yeah, I got very, very, very good at putting the right flags on the right staffs after that. It's not a lesson I forgot in a hurry. So there you go. And that brings this particular episode of Mingles with Jingles to a close. Hope you've enjoyed it. Keep the questions coming in the comments to this video, and I'll browse through the questions for the next Mingles with Jingles, as always. If you're playing World of Tanks, take care on that battlefield. If you're playing War Thunder, watch your six, and I'll catch you next time.